How China keeps control over its massive military. The People's Liberation Army is the armed forces of the People's Republic of China and is the biggest such in the world. It has 2.3 million active personnel and another 2.3 million in reserve. It is one of the most powerful armies in the world, second probably only to the United States Armed Forces. As befitting a party that came to power on the backs of its army, the Communist Party of China, or CPC, is quite focused on keeping control over its army. In this video, we are going to examine the levers by which it keeps that control, which permeates the entire structure from top to bottom and at its most crucial points. Keeping that control has become yet more important over the years as the heads of the party moved from people like Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping, military leaders who have inherent gravitas, to civilian leaders such as Hu Jintao and Xi Jinping. In the United States, as well as Taiwan, the armed forces is operated under the principle of the civilian control of the military. This means that the ultimate strategic decisions are made by the civilian political leadership. They decide when to go to war and when to deploy the forces. The U.S. Secretary of Defense, currently Jim Mattis, exercises command over the U.S. Armed Forces subject to the President and is required to be a civilian retired from the armed forces. China practices this to some extent, but there are some crucial differences. It does not have a Department of Defense, but instead it has a Central Military Commission. This CMC exercises command and control over the PLA. However, there are two CMCs, a state and a party CMC. I will let Wikipedia explain how they differ because they do it very well. The command and control of the People's Liberation Army, People's Armed Police, and People's Liberation Army Militia is exercised in name by the state CMC, supervised by the Standing Committee of the National People's Conference. The state CMC is nominally considered the supreme military policy-making body, and its chairman, elected by the National People's Congress, is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. In reality, command and control of the PLA, however, still resides with the Central Military Commission of the Chinese Communist Party Central Committee, the Party CMC. This is an example of a principle called 一个之口两块派子, one thing, two signs or names. Here is an explanation with American examples. Let's go back to the U.S. Department of Defense. Even though it right now is run by Republicans, the department itself is party neutral and belongs to the institution of the state. The armed forces answers only to the state's Department of Defense and not to those belonging to either the Republican or Democratic parties. Now imagine that the army not only answers to the state's Department of Defense, but to another such department existing within the Republican Party with the exact same top leadership. The memberships are the same, but in any case, the army takes its ultimate orders from the party's committee. The party always leads. Why does this structure exist? The state CMC exists because it was created by Deng Xiaoping, who wanted to formalize the military's role within the government. The party CMC exists because the PLA is the party's army. The PLA does not belong to the state, as with other Western powers. It was founded to bring the party into power. Its continued existence is to keep it in power. One of the party's greatest fears is to have the PLA become depoliticized, meaning that it becomes an institutional army like that in the West. This would be the beginning of the end of the party, as it believes it was for the Soviet Communist Party. Here's Xi Jinping in leaked remarks to explain. Why must we stand firm on the party's leadership over the military? Xi continued, because that's the lesson from the collapse of the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, where the military was depoliticized, separated from the party, and nationalized, the party was disarmed. A few people tried to save the Soviet Union. They seized Gorbachev, but within days it was turned around again because they did not have the instruments to exert power. Yeltsin gave a speech standing on a tank, but the military made no response, keeping so-called neutrality. Finally, Gorbachev announced the disbandment of the Soviet Communist Party in a blithe statement. A big party was gone just like that. Proportionally, the Soviet Communist Party had more members than we do, but nobody was man enough to stand up and resist. Within almost all levels of the military, there are political officers, whose job is to make sure that the executive officers are beholden to the party's instructions. This is an organization that Mao Zedong himself includes within his own writings. about armies. There is a party political officer on the same level of the executive officers, and his job is to make sure the rest of the guys receive the correct political propaganda and ignore counter propaganda from the army. This is one of the crucial ways in which the party maintains control over its army. Keeping full control of that army is given especially strong focus with its most powerful weapons. The rocket force is a military force co-equal with the Army, Navy, and Air Force. They are in control of many of the conventional missile weapons that the PLA controls, as well as the country's small nuclear weapons arsenal. The rocket force gets another level of centralization. It is published that the rocket force is a strategic military service directly controlled and used by the Central Party Committee, the Central Military Commission, and Chairman Xi himself. The desire for complete control is so strong that there are even skip echelon communication networks set up so that those at higher ranks can jump their intermediate military ranks and talk to the lower ranked guys directly, the guys who would launch the missiles at the ground level. Thus, the missiles and nukes are never fired without direct orders from the highest level of the CMC itself. The party needs to handle a delicate balance. Leaders like Xi Jinping and Hu Jintao, largely civilian leaders who do not have the battlefield experience that Deng Xiaoping and Mao Zedong have had, need to keep the army happy. Yet at the same time, keeping the army too happy might turn it into a competent fighting force, or worse, a homegrown monster that decides that it would like to take control over the party for itself.